every child, there is one time, one adventure, and one psycho. I will bathe in your blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Q&A of the movie Psycho Goreman with Stephen Kostansky. Stephen, nice to have you at BIFF, although it's online, of course, this year. Are you happy of the reception that your movie has received until now at this festival, maybe in other festivals?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really shocked at how well it's been received. I thought I was making a movie specifically just for myself. It's very much rooted in my experiences growing up watching R-rated sci-fi and action movies when I was too young to be watching those kinds of movies. And so this movie is me kind of working out the traumas of those experiences. So I thought that spoke only to me, but apparently it speaks to a lot of other people's experiences growing up in the video store age as well. So the reception has been great. And yeah, I'm really just shocked at how many people seem to appreciate the movie. So it's really nice.
Does it involve also some of your experiences growing up, just as such, not just growing up and watching movies?
Yeah, I mean, it does carry like some of my memories as a kid of, well, just what it was like living in Winnipeg as a kid in small town suburbia, playing nonsense games in my backyard and living in the weird fantasy world that a kid, like a kid that loves genre cinema and media typically kind of lives in. I was all about movies and video games and action figures and cartoons and stuff growing up, and that was just my whole world. And I wanted this movie to kind of represent that a little bit, while also having that hard edge of like the hard R movies that I saw growing up, stuff like Terminator 2 and RoboCop. But yeah, stuff like the Crazy Ball game that they're playing is very much inspired by the kinds of games that we'd play on the playground when I was in school with my friends. Just, as a kid, you're always just making your own rules to things. And that was just, part of growing up for me was making these weird games that only made sense to the kids that were playing it, not to the adults that were observing. So, yeah.
But of course, the character of the little girl, you take her pretty far, don't you? She's like, because the subtitle of the movie is, I don't know, little girl, big psycho, but it seems in the end like she's the big psycho, isn't she?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted a character that could stand up to Psycho Goreman. I'm not a fan of how kids are typically portrayed in movies. I find they're always very innocent and wide-eyed. I've been calling it the Harry Potter syndrome, where they just kind of observe the plot happening around them. And I don't think that's really true to how kids are in real life. I think kids are a little nuts, especially at that age. Before you become a teenager and get all the like self-doubt and insecurities that come with that, kids have a lot of confidence and kind of shape the world into what they want it to be. And I wanted a character that represented that. So Mimi's really inspired by kids that I know in my life and just kind of the general tone and atmosphere that I remember from being a kid, where everything was, all emotion was heightened. Everything was the most dramatic thing in the world. And yeah, you're also just kind of like a complete tyrant in the microcosm that is your life. And so, yeah, I wanted Mimi to represent that, for better or for worse, because it can also be super annoying at the same time. And I didn't want to shy away from that. Like, I just didn't want to have a kid character that was super innocent paired with this evil monster. I wanted a kid that was totally nuts to stand up to this creature. And it made sense to pull from my experiences and from kids that I know who are definitely more in the mold of what Mimi is like in the movie. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that definitely succeeded. Mateusz, you had a question?
Yeah, on that note, I think I agree that there's clearly a parallel between Mimi dominating her own little universe and Psycho Goreman trying to dominate the universe itself. And I was wondering, was Mimi, so Nita, such a handful while shooting the movie? How is it working with child actors shooting this kind of a genre movie?
I mean, it was a big concern going into the project that we wouldn't find the right kids to play these characters. Like, I wrote Mimi as a very broad, crazy character, and the concern was we just wouldn't find somebody who could pull that off. But Nita, even just from her like first audition tape that she sent us, I mean, we auditioned a lot of actors for these roles. And saw a lot of self tapes and a lot of in-person auditions. But right from the first tape, I could tell Nita just had like the right spirit, the right energy, and like the right level of professionalism to play the role. Yeah, we really lucked out with our kids, with Nita, with Owen, with Scout. They were all totally prepared for their characters. Like Nita, her background is musical theater and dance, so she's used to, like, when you're in theater you memorize the whole script, which is not, it's not really what you do in film. So like she had the whole script memorized, she knew her lines, she knew everybody else's lines. Like she there's times where it was like she knew what was going on more than even I knew what was going on. Like she just had everything committed to memory and was super professional all the way through. Like I could not have asked for a better situation with these kids. Like they really carried the movie. And yeah, like Nita, just in terms of her personality, like she already carried so much of what Mimi is. Like it wasn't a big shift for her to become Mimi. And Nita herself will admit that she's very much like that character already. Like she has that type of personality. Which just further enhances my point that like that's what kids are like in real life. Like they're, you know, crazy and dramatic and get in your face and have like a kind of confidence that only a kid can have. So yeah, we really lucked out with her. She really carries the movie and is like the heart of the story, I think, as well. I felt that she like conveyed all the obnoxiousness of the character, but also pulled off the vulnerability, which was another tough balance that I was concerned about. But I think she balanced it perfectly.
But also the story is broad in a way, as in a child movie, isn't it?
Yes.
That's probably on purpose, I suppose, because of the way you bring this whole crazy ball game into it, and as you explained before, the way the kids live basically. But it's not a child movie, is it? I mean, the PG, the monster is called PG. If you were to put a rating on it, a PG rating, what age would you put on it?
I would hope it would get an R. I mean, an X would be insane, but I don't think we push things that far. But yeah, the movie is supposed to be like those kinds of R-rated movies that I watched as a kid that have all the stuff that kids' movies have. Like, I mean, you make a movie called RoboCop and you have like a shiny chrome robot cop going around fighting crime. Like, of course, a kid's going to want to see that, but there's also scenes of guys getting riddled with bullets and like blood splattering everywhere and a guy getting covered in toxic waste and getting run over by a car. It's like, I find that there's such an opposition to like the fun sci-fi elements and the brutal reality of those types of movies that I just want to make a thing that embodied that spirit, where there's like real childlike tropes, like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of story with really adult consequences to everything. And I just like juxtaposing those two things because I find it really entertaining. So yeah, it's like not a movie for kids, but at the same time, if you're a cool parent with like a I don't know, 9 or 10-year-old kid that loves monsters, I would not be opposed to them letting their kid watch the movie, because maybe it'll have the same effect on them that stuff like Terminator 2 and RoboCop and Aliens had on me, where, I love all the sci-fi action trappings of those movies, but was also traumatized by the violence. But I feel like that trauma inspired me to make monsters and make movies and kind of pursue the career that I chose. So my hope is that maybe PG will inspire some other kid to make movies and make his own PG in the years to come sometime.
Of course, you also have a serious go at the traditional family values in the movie, not to mention Jesus on his cross, don't you?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I wanted a parallel between Mimi and PG that was very visual and overt, and so I show PG crushing that Templar cross at the beginning, and then having Mimi crush the cross. I really wanted to have a moment that undercutted the because before that there's the speech between the dad and Mimi, where there's that kind of pep talk where you think everything's fine, and I wanted to just undercut that as much as possible and be like, no, she's still a psycho. She's just as crazy as PG. Because I find that always a funny thing in these kinds of movies, is that you have these scenes of people connecting and showing these family values and kind of trying to sell this suburban family dynamic and having a traditional story arc, but at the same time there's people dying, cops dying and becoming melting men, kids exploding, all this horrible shit's going on, but everyone's kind of deluded into thinking it's fine by the end. And so yeah, I wanted to have a really overt and shocking kind of moment to remind people that yeah, that's great, they just had a heart to heart, but she's still crazy. And so yeah, I tried to have something like that every 10 minutes in the movie, just to throw people off.
Yeah, that seems to be a bit of a moral of the story towards the end of the movie, that whatever happens to other people, I don't care as long as I'm fine. Don't hurt my family, but go on destroying the universe.
Well, and I feel like that's a question that I've had in my mind with every movie like this that I watch. And I think it's a thing that people, when you get swept up in the story and the characters, you forget about consequences. And so I wanted to draw attention to that and be like, isn't it kind of weird that in all these movies, there's this trail of destruction left behind everyone, but because everybody hugs at the end, we're supposed to think it's okay. I think that was something I wanted to draw as much attention to as possible, is just kind of the overall absurdity of these types of narratives where horrible stuff happens, but because the characters that we care about are okay at the end, we're supposed to be fine with it. So yeah, that was me kind of drawing attention to some of those tropes that I've always found a little strange in the sci-fi action family adventure movies.
But you probably draw a parallel with reality as well, because in the end they're watching, the other families watching the news, destruction everywhere, and of course they're just having their Sunday roast. So
yeah, with their son that is now a brain that they don't seem to care about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you made a nice parallel there as well, if I may say.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that really for anyone to pretend things are fine by the end of a movie like this, they have to be pretty delusional. And that's the funniest part of the whole story to me, is that things aren't fine. It's really just that they've convinced themselves that things are fine. And I think that's more true to life than trying to tell people that things are actually fine. Because I think that's how we get through life most of the time, is just convincing ourselves that it's all good when it's not. I feel like 2020 is a pretty good example of that. It really just comes down to how we perceive things. And so, yeah, that's why the end of the movie is the way that it is.
Yeah, on that, did you shoot the movie during the pandemic, or did you shoot it before? Because it came out last year, but I wonder when you actually recorded.
We shot it. We started shooting actually 2018. November 2018, and we finished in the spring of 2019. And then it was like about 8 months of post through 2019, and we were supposed to premiere it March 2020, March 13th. So, it would have been a year ago yesterday. And yeah, the festival got canceled because of the pandemic. So our premiere got canceled. And then thankfully the movie was in the can. It was finished. We were just, waiting on what to do with it. But yeah, it was supposed to come out initially October of 2020, but we pushed it again because things obviously didn't get better as quickly as we thought they would. And so we decided to just put it out January of this year because we had to put it out sometime. We weren't going to sit on it forever. And I think in the end, it was a good idea because nothing was really coming out. And so I think it hit at like the exact right time. We weren't sandwiched between two Marvel movies or something. So it was a pretty dead period in movie releases. So I think we lucked out and got a lot more eyes on the movie than I think we usually would have gotten if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic right now. Everybody's at home. They needed something to watch. And so, yeah, we gave them something real goofy to check out.
Apparently, you even have some nice merch, some action figures. And do you have any more plans for this story, like a sequel, prequel, or anything else?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I mean, we want to do as much stuff to build out the world as possible. I mean, I set up a pretty kind of crazy universe, and I think there's a lot of directions for it to go. I'm in the process of trying to figure out like what the next step is going to be. Obviously, we have our merch that's going to come out. We're going to have toys, T-shirts, that kind of stuff. Thinking about trying to do maybe a comic book of some kind. Would be nice to do a thing that doesn't involve me having to do a ton of work making monsters. Would be a nice change of pace. So we might do a comic. But yeah, as far as a sequel, I'm still figuring out what that's going to look like, but it is something that's going to happen eventually in some way. It's just whether it's a movie or a TV show, I don't know. We're figuring it out, but expect something at some point.
Yeah, I can definitely see myself at age 10 playing with a figurine of PG and Pandora and the Paladin. So that sounds like a great idea. And on that, I mean, the monsters in the movie are great. They have this sort of 80s, 90s feel. And I know that you have a long history of working with special effects and prosthetics. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like my career in prosthetics goes, it sort of happened parallel to me directing and making my own movies. I started when I was 12 doing stop motion animation in my parents' basement on an old Super 8 camera. And as I transitioned out of that into live action, I wanted to make monsters for my movies. And so that's when I started figuring out creature effects. And, I was just slowly figuring out how to do prosthetics and make monster masks and things. And that seemed like the most feasible option as like a career path in the film industry. I figured just being like going into directing as a job didn't seem very achievable. So I was like, well, I can glue zombie prosthetics onto people. At least that seems doable. So that became my day job while I was also making movies on the side. And now I'm at a point where it's like both are going at the same time, where I'm, working in the shop sometimes, or I'm off directing movies or TV shows other times. And, something like PG, I'm kind of doing both at the same time, where I'm also building all the monsters, but also directing the movie. So yeah, I mean, I love doing both. I love being able to dream up creatures and then build them and then also put them in front of the camera and tell them what to do. That's like the perfect scenario for me creatively. So yeah, like it's really right now, I'm just kind of jumping back and forth between the two. Like I'm working at the shop now on a couple TV shows, shooting up here in Toronto. And I'll do that until the next directing gig comes around, and I'll just, jump over to that. So yeah, I'm kind of like doing both things at the same time.
That's very cool. I guess working on a budget, it's not always easy to sort of fulfill your vision. So how do you go about it? How do you try to maintain a certain level of in terms of budget, but still, you know, have the monsters, have the effects that you always wanted to see there?
I mean, part of it for PG especially was making an aesthetic choice that I wasn't going for realism, that I like design wise and creature wise, like I was going for a bit of a like Super Sentai vibe. Like I love the way creatures in like Japanese TV shows, like from the 80s and 90s, like I love how those look. So I was trying to emulate that as much as possible, which also simplified the builds for everything. You know, I didn't make everything like a super elaborate animatronic thing because I obviously couldn't afford to do that. But also it just wasn't the look I was going for. Like I find with the kinds of stuff that I like, the more inanimate and fake stuff looks, the more unsettling it becomes at times. So I made that artistic decision early on with the movie, which helped a lot because then it was just a case of like a lot of fabrication and just making inanimate objects that moved a little bit, but not very much. And the charm became in how little they moved. But yeah, a lot of the movie was like, especially our creature build, was just fabricated out of found objects and stuff from the dollar store and doing things as on the cheap as humanly possible. We had a very low budget to pay our shop masters effects to do the build. So we basically like funneled that money into the bigger, more expensive creatures. Like something like Pandora was more elaborate because there's a lot of components to that suit. But then, yeah, like stuff like Brain Alistair, I just kind of fabricated myself out of just like latex sheets of brain texture over like a foam form that I made out of like chicken wire and mattress foam. It was a lot of like reusing stuff from other things, like the Judicator character in the Gygax Council, the guy with the like animated mouth that moves and he's got like glowing eyes. That guy's head is actually the puppet head for Leprechaun from Leprechaun Returns. I just like repurposed it and put a different face on it. So I find that's how you stretch your budget on these kinds of projects, is you just take stuff you already have and repurpose it. There's a lot of fabrication, like done kind of in the way that cosplay is done, like a lot of EVA foam and just kind of like building one-offs of things instead of going the traditional route of like sculpting, molding, casting, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was just finding all the cheap workarounds to make it happen for the 50 grand that we had to build all our creatures. And yeah, it was just a lot of late nights, me and my assistants building things on the cheap. So yeah, it's just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it happen.
And I guess this sort of, because I'm looking at the time as well, it sort of takes us to our usual wrap-up question, basically. What would happen if you did have unlimited, so to speak, budget? So not 50 grand, but let's say 50 million or whatever.
I mean, all I would really want out of that is to pay everyone a nice amount of money to justify them putting in those kinds of hours. Like I would really put all that into labor, but at the same time, if you have too much money, then it's like it kind of takes away some of the fun and the creativity to me. I mean, I've always worked in the low budget world. And I think a lot of the creative innovation comes out of having to make a low budget work. So if you have everything at your disposal, then it's not, I feel like some of the charm is gone because you don't have to figure anything out and you don't have to like you've got like this much story, but this much budget. Figuring out how to squeeze this into that is where a lot of the fun ideas come from. So if you don't have to do that, then you're just throwing money at things. And, that just doesn't seem as exciting to me. So I think if I had that kind of money, I would pay my crew to pay them the most money they've ever been paid on a show like this, but they'd still have to make stuff out of things from the dollar store because that's where the inventive.
some people start their careers splashing brains around and then end up doing the Lord of the Rings. I'm just saying, you got to have a dream project, right?
Oh yeah.
Somewhere down the line.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely like fantasy projects I would love to do that would cost a lot of money to do. But if I'm not in the shop sculpting a monster mask for it myself, then it's like not really the spirit of what my movies are about, if that makes sense. So as long as there's always a handmade quality in whatever the project is, I'll be happy and I'll be having fun doing it. But yeah, if I get attached to something where it's like, we're going to do it all CG and you don't have to do any of it, I'm going to be pretty depressed.
I think we hear you, and we really enjoyed the result that we saw on screen with Psycho Goreman. Mateusz, I don't know if you have a final question.
No, I mean, I would just agree that I guess it's difficult to make a low budget movie with a high budget. It doesn't get the same feel. So thank you for this one. It was definitely well spent 2 hours for me.
Thank you.
And I think this movie would have been great in a cinema with a live audience at BIFF. I think it goes at the heart of what BIFF is about. I think it would really do a good job.
I agree with that. The audience would have gone completely insane at BIFF, screaming at the screen. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, Steven, thank you very much for this Q&A. It was very entertaining, and so was the movie, of course. And we're really looking forward to seeing you in real life at BIFF, hopefully quite soon.
Yeah, let's do this again in the future. That would be awesome.
Or PG for short.
I will kill you. PG. Rated R.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I've heard the stories. I hear you have a very animated audience. My friend Jeremy was there for Father's Day. I think you guys screened there years ago. And yeah, he said it was pretty nuts, the reaction. And I am glad that I don't have to go up on stage and sing a song like he had to do. I'll try my best to do something today that delivers, but if I had to do that in front of your crowds, I would definitely choke up and not be able to handle it. So.
Never mind. Something tells me your time will come, both for another movie for our audience to appreciate and for a song. I'm afraid.
Oh, good. All right, I'll start practicing, I guess.